Um, so it is July 20th and it is 5:31 p.m. This is the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission meeting. And we will start with a little, I will turn it over to Roy Clark to get us started.
Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the July 20th meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission. Before we go any further, I'd like to announce the appointments of two new commissioners, Don Barrett and Randy Evans. And you recall from the meeting last month that Rob McCann had his last meeting on the commission. And following the meeting last month, Lonnie Miller resigned. Tracy, would you please do the roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Baker?
Here.
Commissioner Barrett?
Here.
Commissioner Evans?
Here.
Commissioner Flanagan?
Yo.
Commissioner Friedman?
Here.
Commissioner Futterman? Commissioner Garrett?
Here.
Commissioner Gauthier?
Here.
Commissioner Ocanias?
Here.
Commissioner Torrens?
All right, so we will let Jake in whenever he gets here, but I do not see him yet.
So I'd like to welcome the commissioners and the visitors and Tim Harter, who will be making a presentation for Bird Scooters. And we should be having Rob McCann join us shortly to continue the discussion on Night Sky. I'd like to now ask Don and Randy if they would speak for 2 or 3 minutes about their background and their interest in sustainability, our new commissioners. Don, would you start?
Sure. Locally, I'm involved with 1PS for a long time. That's one reason why you've never seen me at sustainability, because it's been very busy during this Zoom era. I'm a health sociologist. I've worked in health research for many, many years. I'm retired. And in my working in health research, I've focused on how we keep a healthy environment for people who don't quite fit into the mainstream. I've focused on the intersection of inequality and health. So my interest in sustainability are interested in all the environmental factors that reflect who has access to resources, who can easily and effectively do the sort of things necessary to keep their environment healthy and those sorts of things. The other thing is I live in a mobile home park, and I see a variety of things in terms of what we do through sustainability that are difficult to do in a setting like a mobile home park. So that's part of what's spurring my interest.
Thank you, Don. Randy?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Before I start, I have to ask Jim, are you off Macadam there somewhere?
Yeah, by the Steel Bridge is where I'm at.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you're up a little ways. So I'm a relatively new resident of Palm Springs, having come actually from Portland. So thanks for sharing the view, Jim.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I lived up the hill from there for a while. So yeah, my background, probably the most relevant piece was I actually worked for the Portland Development Commission, which was the city's redevelopment agency. It's now called Prosper Portland, and had a role similar to Patrick. I was a staff person. Worked on a number of projects throughout the city, both related to economic development and real estate development. A couple of things that I was proud of to participate in. Created something called a Green Features Grant. It was a small grant program for small businesses and some targeted neighborhood districts to do sustainable improvements, things like solar, green roofs, permeable pavers, energy efficiency upgrades, and things like that as part of a facade improvement program. Was also involved in the National Main Street Trust and a Main Street program in Portland for neighborhoods. which we added a sustainability kind of pillar to that program, where neighborhood business districts had to apply to participate in this and create sustainability metrics that they would work towards as part of their participation in that. So I left there in 2012 and now involved in healthcare. I now am a senior analyst with a health insurance company, but focused on social determinants of health and policy analysis. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of kind of what Dawn was saying, kind of health and wellness and how sustainability and climate change and a lot of the topics that this commission hits, like pedestrian safety and biking and some of those. So overall, I thought my background and my current work and my interests, so I'm happy to participate and look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Randy. Welcome again, Don and Randy. For visitors, there will be time for public comments later in the meeting. I ask everybody to keep your microphones muted during the meeting, and then please raise your hand to be called to speak, and then unmute your microphone. And if nobody seems to be paying attention, if you raise your hand because we can't always see everybody at the same time, then please speak up. The next item on the agenda, I'll turn over to Patrick and Tracy, and that is the election of the chair and the vice chair. Since we're at the beginning of the cycle of terms, we're obligated to have an election at this meeting.
Right. Thanks, Roy. And so I did want to mention that we did solicit nominations at the last meeting as well as in the interim. We did get one nomination for chair, and that was for Chair Clark to continue his tenure for the last year of his term. So does anybody have any other nominations for chair at this time?
Patrick, since I was the one who sent in the nomination of Chair Clark, I'd like to formally move the re-election of Chair Clark for a further one-year term as chair of the Sustainability Commission.
All right, thank you. Do we need to second that or should we just vote?
Well, does the chair accept the nomination?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
All right. All right.
good question.
All right, so a nomination has been made. It is seconded by Sandra, and Roy has accepted that nomination. And we are going to use the super cool polling function to do the voting, even though we only have one to vote on. So just because we did it. So if you guys want to just click on who you want to vote for there.
Where is it?
We're launching it right now.
There it is. Wow.
I know, we're getting very high tech. All right. So I think that's everybody. So thank you very much. Mr. Clark is the new chair for the next year. So we did not have any nominations for vice chair. And I do realize that we have a couple of new people and even really 4 new people who are relatively new. So I can either take nominations for vice chair at this time, or we can defer that conversation to our September meeting after people maybe have had a little more orientation to what we're working on. So yes, Greg.
Yeah, I sent you a nomination.
You did. Oh my gosh.
But I don't have to keep it a secret. I nominated David Friedman for vice chair.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Yes. Okay. So David Friedman nominated as vice chair. Any other nominations? All right. I suppose the question to David, do you accept the nomination?
If there are no other nominations, yes. I would simply point out that both Chair Clark and I would term out next year. I will accept the nomination, but on the other hand, if somebody else feels that they would like to serve, I would not oppose that. We would end up with a full new slate of officers next term. So I had not nominated myself for that reason. That being said, I'm not going to refuse the nomination. I work very closely with Chair Clark on a number of matters.
Okay.
So
All right. Any other nominations for vice chair? All right, then we will plan to move forward with that. And we will try to be very inclusive in our management of the group, I think, over the next year to make sure that others are involved who will be here into the future. So, all right. Okay, then I think, do we have to do, I don't have a poll for you, David, I'm sorry. So, all right, I guess all those in favor of having David be our vice chair, say aye, raise your hand. All right, 1, 2, 3,
Aye.
4. All right.
thank you for your comments. folks.
All right, vote is unanimous. And we will move forward with that slate for the next year. And all right. So I think that concludes our voting and process.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you all. The next item in the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. It was emailed and posted on Thursday, June 10th. Are there any comments or requested changes to the agenda? Hearing no objections or comments or changes, the agenda is accepted. Now we'll move on to staff comments. Patrick?
So I don't have too much to add to what was included in the update memo, but I did just want to mention the fact on the foodware ordinance front that was finalized on July 8th. And we are starting to develop outreach materials related to that. And we did have a really good meeting today with a local owner of several local McDonald's who's interested in talking to us further and working with us to figure out how they can implement this ordinance successfully, and also talk to us about some of the things that make them unique, which we may have to factor into some of the implementation. So that was a really good meeting and good conversation. Nona Watson also participated in that meeting, and she is with the Palm Springs Chamber of Commerce and also expressed her interest in being involved in the rollout of this as well. So I thought those were great signs. You know, the response from local businesses was pretty quiet. A lot of it due to COVID, I think. But we've had a pretty good response since the ordinance was passed, and a lot of interest by a few businesses around town. So we're hopeful that that interest turns into action. So we're gonna be planning to move forward with that. The other piece of that is that we will be issuing this week, I think, an RFP to hire a consultant to assist us with the outreach and engagement of the business community on the foodware ordinance, as well as potentially on the organics front. So, because those things are kind of related. So anyway, so I think that's about it on the staff updates.
I have one question.
Yes,
Regarding the airport demo garden,
yes,
have they started to remove the turf yet?
they have not. So we plan to go out to bid for that probably next week or the week after. And then the part of the construction request will be for them to eliminate the grass.
I know we wanted to do that during the summer, so there would be time.
Yeah, so we definitely want to have somebody on board in the August timeframe so that we still have September to figure out how to do that and how to do that best.
Thank you.
And if we run into a snag on that front, then the city will just go ahead and do that.
Are there any other questions or comments for Patrick?
Don has a question.
Don.
Unmute Don. You need to
I'm used,
unmute Don.
I'm used to running the meeting, so I forget how to do things like unmute. Can you turn on the closed caption?
Oh, sure, thank you. All right. All right, I think it should be on now.
It is.
Thanks for that reminder. All right. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, I think we can.
I have a technical point. Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, is that Paul?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Hi, Patrick. During the vote, the Zoom technical one, it's actually appearing for guests like myself. So I got to vote for Roy.
I knew
But
I knew there were
wanted
12
you
and
to
I
know.
thought it was you. Yes.
It was me. So I just wanted you to know that it's showing up for guests in case you have another election and all that.
Great. Thank you
I
so
voted
much.
for
I appreciate it.
David
That's-
too, but I just raised my hand.
Right. I appreciate that. That's the first time we've used that function. So it's good to know.
Makers.
Okay,
All right.
now we'll move on to public comments. This is time for members of the public to address the Sustainability Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. Commission values your comments, but pursuant to the Brown Act, cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. Do we have anybody here tonight to make public comment?
Yes, Paul.
Is
We have
that
two.
30-year-old Paul in the picture?
So now you get to see what I look like when I had hair.
I see that. Wow.
It's so nice seeing all these friends here. So let me quickly get into it, and I'll do my 11 minutes quickly. I mean, 2 minutes. Paul Henriksen, Palm Springs. I want to speak briefly on old item C. I think it's 2. Yes, smoking ordinance. No surprise to any of you. So Palm Springs should have long ago become a smoke-free city. The efforts to do so have been in the works for many years. It's time to get it done. There has never been, ever, a single credible argument to even remotely justify smoking, period. Full stop. There are some studies, falsely manufactured studies, that some psychiatric patients may require tobacco to treat their conditions. This is a well-known study, bought and paid for by the tobacco industry, and obviously never peer-reviewed. It's bunk, period. Full stop. Cannabis can be consumed in numerous ways. To smoke it is only one of many. So to carve out an exception in multifamily dwellings or elsewhere for the purpose of protecting smoking cannabis is beyond inappropriate and ignores the far higher priorities of public health and safety. Multifamily dwelling smoking bans are most certainly not a new experiment and furthers the higher priorities of public health and safety and environmental protections too. Multifamily dwelling smoking bans needs to happen and happen now, period. Full stop. The priorities of the very nature of this commission is public health and safety and environmental protection. Palm Springs as a smoke-free city is long, long, long overdue, period. Full stop. Let's get it done. And thank you, Commissioner Baker, for doing such a great job keeping this going. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Are there any other public comments?
Haley Preston also has her hand up.
Okay. Haley?
Hi, everyone. I'm Haley Preston from the Desert Community Compost Coalition. Greetings, members of the Sustainability Commission. I'm speaking to the agenda item on waste reduction because we are at a point where our unsustainable practices around food scrap recycling and landfilled organics are costing us. I've been in discussions with members of this commission since January of this year. And as we've discussed, one of the most effective, cost-effective, and immediately accessible ways to make the biggest impact is through community composting. To that end, the Community Compost Coalition has collaborated with the Sustainability Commission and many other civic partners. And we look forward to working with you and establishing a community space for collection and processing and a plan for full compliance of State Bill 1383 and 1826, which includes community composting. So I'm requesting from this commission that we have a standing place on the commission's monthly agenda. Community composting is an essential public service and essential public good, and our community needs to count on the Sustainability Commission to represent the benefits of community composting to the City Council. So thank you very much, and I wish you all a good vacation in August and look forward to continuing our work in September.
Thank you, Haley. Are there any other public comments?
I see no other hands.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll move on to presentations. And we have Tim Harder here to speak about Bird scooters. We've allowed 10 minutes, which should include time for a few questions. Tim?
Hi all, thanks for taking the time and happy to share my screen. Let me just do this real fast. Saying host disabled, share screen. Maybe if you can make me a host, Patrick, that should work.
Good. Eddie?
Got it. Good. Everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Again, thanks for making the time. My name's Tim Harder. I'm Director of Government Partnerships for the US West region. I'm based in LA, but I come out to Palm Springs very often with my husband, so I know very closely how love to bring some sustainability options to Palm Springs. Look forward to chatting with you all tonight about it. But what is Bird? It's a last mile stamp electric vehicle sharing company dedicated to bringing affordable, environmentally friendly transportation solutions to communities everywhere. Just last week, we announced we're in 250 cities and 27 countries now around the world. When I started 3 years ago, we were in 4 cities in Southern California. So it's quickly being adopted. Mission is to get people out of cars, solve the last mile problem, connect more residents to transit options, reduce congestion, improve air quality, which is the most important to us, reduce GHG emissions, and improve overall quality of life in cities. So how it works, use the Bird smartphone app, you download an app, riders find the closest bird on a map, unlock it, and complete the safety tutorial to start their ride. Costs $1 to start, and then per minute fee, and you're off. Our approach working with cities is like no cost to the city of Palm Springs or any other cities that we're working with. Understand if Bird is a good fit for the needs of the community. Operational plan outline how Bird can best serve your city based on city input and Bird data. Decision to move forward in local operational outreach. Launch day, give out helmets and test it out and show people how to use it, and then learn from the pilot program. So we've been working with city council members in Palm Springs. They're interested in it, as well as the city manager. And then Patrick asked us to do a presentation here at the Sustainability Commission, answer more questions and dive a little bit deeper in. So we would work with a local entrepreneur from the community to manage the fleet on the ground. In exchange, they would earn money on each ride. It's deep community ties, so there'd be local people on the ground managing the fleet. These would, we'd be creating more jobs, and be creating jobs immediately in Palm Springs. Economic opportunity. Obviously, the industry leader, as I mentioned, we started the industry. We started the micromobility industry that was literally about 3.5-4 years ago, and again now we're, there's multiple companies now involved in the space, and it's really taken off to replace short cart trips around the world. Just for visibility, about 60% of the car trips in the United States are 2 miles or less. So just think about that a little bit more. Local impact is 63% of rides connect to a local business. 70,000 the average take-home earnings from local entrepreneurs partnering with Bird, and it's 26% more jobs accessibility. So connecting to local businesses, think about this. We stay a lot off the main drag. We'll stay at Seven Springs Inn or Saguaro Hotel or the V Curve or Palm Springs or whatnot. And every time we come, we're about 1.5 miles or 1 mile or 2 miles away from downtown. So we have to take an Uber or a Lyft to get downtown. So just think about all the trips we could replace things like going to, small local businesses in Palm Springs via sustainable mobility. And it's working. What we've been saying for the past 3 years, it's cities are putting out their own data that's showing that we are replacing car trips. You can see some cities here, but anywhere from 32 to 55% car trip replacement. Our independent city studies confirm that 42% of micromobility directly replaced a car trip. And again, this is all internal city data coming out. So enhancing car-free mobility, even diving deeper in, like what are the riders doing? You can see here 38% are replacing a car trip in LA, 40% in San Diego. On the bottom left, you can see who uses Bird to get to work or school. 35% in San Francisco, 33% in Santa Monica. So they're different use cases. You can see a survey here from Santa Monica. 59% of respondents reduced car usage since starting to ride e-scooters. 57% of respondents reduced ride-hail usage since starting to ride e-scooters. So imagine the reduction in Uber and Lyft trips that you would see in Palm Springs. Safety first, that's the big motto that we have at Bird. So there's lots of headlines of, scooter rates up, 800% and EMS emergencies going crazy. Well, cities aren't really finding that. They're doing their own reports, they're doing their own independent studies, and they're showing that, here in Portland, I think someone mentioned they're from Portland, very popular in Portland. E-scooters have risks similar to other parts of the transportation system. We see it's very similar to bicyclists. 4 months of EMS records show less than 5 e-scooter injuries per month. So will it be perfect? No, but will it be increasing safety with less cars on the road? Yes. So we lead on safety, innovative, helmet selfie, warm-up mode. So you would make it so that basically we have technology that you can make it so that if it's your first ride, you would be automatically entered into a warm-up mode where maybe you can't go faster than 10 miles per hour. And you have to go through a extra safety tutorial. So there's things like that. And then you can graduate to regular mode where you go up to 15 miles per hour. And then there's no longer the scooters that are on the ground. So, in the early days, it was just off the shelf scooters. And they lasted maybe 3 to 6 months. We're now going on, we just announced our latest model, our Bird 3. We're expecting it to last 4 to 6 years. And it's designed fully in-house now with double kickstand and autonomous emergency braking system, literally the only one in the world in scooters. So, I mean, it's just much, much, much safer than it used to be years ago. So it's just improved every model. Someone wanted to know about the bikes. So we just announced that about a week and a half ago. So we are moving into bikes. We don't want to just be a scooter company. We want to be a micromobility company. So we are doing bikes now as well. But the thing about bikes is they're very expensive. So, it needs to be probably both the scooters and bikes to make it sustainable. I'm sure Patrick and others in cities can talk about how much it costs to operate bike share or bike systems, because it's very operational heavy. But you can see here swappable batteries, extra bright tail lights. I know you guys are talking about clear skies and dark skies. I know that's been a conversation in Palm Springs a lot. So lots of all this paint's like reflecting. The lightings, there's lights everywhere all over it, just the same as our scooters. So work together with Palm Springs to bring more sustainable mobility to the city. You can see here, collect data to identify protected green lines and other safe places to ride. So, really helping the city move away from such car heavy usage, encouraging mode shift out of cars via pricing, making sure that it's much cheaper. On average, we're about 30 to 40% below Uber and Lyft pricing. It would probably be much cheaper in Palm Springs, knowing the cost of Ubers and Lyfts since I've been out there most recently. Making sustainable choices the easy choice, basically. How do we make it so that it's convenient pickup and drop off locations, reallocation of parking spaces, making sure that they're available throughout the city so that everyone uses them, just not only in downtown, but throughout the whole city. And then build complementary experiences with transit. How do we integrate with SunBus or other agencies to make it so that people make it really easy to use them? And yeah, and that's sort of it. Together we can achieve more livable cities. So you can sort of see the existing sort of, as I drive down Indian Canyon or Palm Canyon Drive, what I see is on the top, but imagine what it could look like on the bottom with, dedicated green spaces and, transit lines and more people out walking and stuff like that. You can see here on the bottom right, this just came out recently, allocating space on how much a car parking sits there, about 95% of the time, how much revenue it generates compared to how much bikes and scooters could generate, how much on-street dining generates. But I just found that really interesting. But yeah, thanks for your time and happy to answer any questions, and look forward to working with you all.
Are there any questions for Tim?
I have one.
Go ahead, Greg.
Are there any cities in which you're doing no scooter zones? Specifically, I'm thinking around hospitals and nursing homes. I find when I'm at the hospital in San Diego, I'm often startled by or almost run over by the scooters. So it's just a sensitivity to how mobile the people around those environments are.
Definitely. Yep. So we have a technology that we actually created called geofencing. And literally it allows us to basically use the GPS and make it so that parking can't be permitted there. Right. So I know the pretty area pretty well. Like I probably wouldn't allow scooter parking to be like on the main drag, like on, on Palm Canyon or stuff like that. I'd probably make it off the sides between Palm Canyon and Indian Drive, right? Like I'm thinking about, there's lots of areas of Palm Springs where we want to make it where there's no parking allowed or there's no riding allowed or reduced speeds. And so we have all that technology where we would work with, Patrick and the city team to basically put those geofences in place. We would also learn, there might be some areas that hotspots that pop up during the pilot, and we can obviously geofence those in real time. So it takes us less than 2 hours at a geofence location.
So is there outreach that takes place with the community beforehand to find out maybe what some of those spots that the community already knows exist?
There is a little bit, so I'm going to talk to the chamber probably, and council members are directing me to talk with, I'll probably work with Patrick and the new city manager as well to do a little bit more outreach. That's the goal. Is we're supposed to do outreach during August, the next 6 to 8 weeks, and then bring something before council. So we would do a little bit of that, but it's not going to be perfect on day one. We would learn, there would be other hotspots that would probably arise that we wouldn't get to know. Maybe some HOA areas or some areas in Palm Springs that don't want to see scooters on their property. And we would just geofence and work with the city on those locations as they pop up.
Are there any more questions for Tim?
We have Don,
Carl.
Jim, and Carl.
Okay.
Me?
In that order?
Yep, okay. Following up actually on Greg's comments, I do see, I ride my bike a lot in Palm Springs, and I do see areas where there is a higher level of misbehavior by people on scooters. Maybe not yours, I don't identify specifically, but there seems to be higher levels of misbehavior. So if it was possible for there to be a way for people like me as a bicyclist to say, to contact to Bird and say, this area is an area where we're seeing lots of problem with scooter drivers. And you need to do something about it. They're driving too fast. They're not paying attention to pedestrians or something like that.
Yep. So there's a thing called community mode in the Bird app. It's just a little clicker on the right hand. You don't have to, you just download the app. Actually, that's it. It's like our own 311 kind of thing. Or you can ask, maybe it's 311 requests are going to the city that would, be recognized. Or we would just do community outreach where I talk to the Bike Coalition or stuff like that. If you guys are seeing a hot spot, like a corner or an intersection like that, we can do technology on our side with the shared scooters. We can't do anything with the personal scooters, just the shared scooters that we would have in the public right of way. We can control stuff like that. There's a lot of bad rider experience where it's like, I would say probably 5% of people are bad riders or don't use the services correctly. And we ban them, or we get, like, they get reported on enough where they're removed from the service or the platform. So this is something cities have been asking for a long time. So we've instituted like violation fines, and when they get flagged on their accounts are removed.
I liked your response there. My only concerns, two things. One is there's a lot of us who use computers and not apps. We're old school. And the other thing is that, when I'm on my bike, I can't do anything. I'm not going to stop and try to take a picture of someone on a Bird just to then report them to you. So the notion that maybe there's areas where there's more bad behavior that can be enforced, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so we definitely do that. So for instance, like in San Diego in the Gaslamp Quarter, right? Like there's lots of tourists down there and they're riding around, and there was door riding going on. So I was just down there for like a tour, like an infield audit, and I instituted a 5-mile-per-hour geofence because I personally saw stuff going on that I wasn't liking. And the community, the Gaslamp bid has brought it up before. And so I went down there and, looked around, and we instituted changes based on that feedback and seeing that stuff. So we do the same, if I got an email from you or a call from, we would respond to those things and look into that and see if it's a big issue, or see if there's some other issues. Is it sidewalk riding because there's no bike lane or it's not protected enough for people don't feel safe there? And we're getting a lot of sidewalk riding in this certain zone, and we give that feedback to the city and work with them.
So
Good, thank you.
I'm doing
Yeah.
my snooping.
So that was gonna be my question, Tim, too, is about
Penguin
sidewalk
is
riding.
owned by the Coachella Valley Housing
There's
Authority.
someone else is talking right now. You should mute, please.
Yes, that's where this woman's talking about doing her compost. thing.
Hello?
Jennifer, I think you want to mute.
Jennifer?
Yeah,
I think maybe I
Yeah.
can actually mute her because I'm a co-host now.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can get the thing.
Oh, yeah. Yep, just did.
Hey, so Tim, I'm the one in Portland. I live in Palm Springs. I'm just up here temporarily, but my question was about the granularity of geofencing, and it's the sidewalk riding that's the issue here. There's a lot of people get going fast on it, but can you have enough granularity to make people ride fast in the street, but not on the sidewalk, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, so it's getting there. It's getting really close. The GPS accuracy is much better. The good thing about Palm Springs being a little bit late is like you'll probably be getting the latest model, which would be the Bird 2 or the Bird 3, and the GPS is much more accurate. Again, we would just sort of monitor the situation, and obviously if everyone was seeing certain sidewalk riding, I think we would probably raise that. But again, I think there's some parts of the city, or it might be okay on the sidewalk because there's really wide sidewalks in some parts of the neighborhoods in Palm Springs that I've been in.
So
I
it
wouldn't want
sounds like
it all across the whole city, but like maybe certain neighborhoods.
So it sounds like what you're saying is you could limit Palm Canyon's the roadway to 5 miles an hour, and Baristo and the adjoining streets could be 10 miles an hour, 15, where there's a bike path, and stuff like that. Okay, great. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, what was the street behind? Was it Barrio?
Bellardo is where the bike
Yeah.
paths are. We're trying to move more bike paths.
Right.
We want to get more bike paths out there. So
Yeah,
I
so that
think it's
was
great.
right. I was just I stayed at the V Palm Springs, and that was the route my Uber driver took around, to go through around the city. But again, it was a mile and a half, and I was like, man, look at this amazing bike lane here. Like, I would love to geofence, the downtown area, and work with, Patrick and others to put in some parking on the side streets so that we can get people to downtown on the bike lane on that street that's not really being that much used by cars.
Great. Thank you.
Who is next with a question?
That would be me. Carl.
Carl, go ahead.
Hi, Tim. I have several questions. Starting back 2 or 3 years ago, when this was first brought to the city, there was a huge kerfuffle. I don't know if it was Bird or who it was that just automatically jumped their scooters onto the city. Was that you, or is that someone
That
else?
was us. Yep, you guys were actually the last city in the world to receive a rogue launch. We called it consumer launching, just to prove the model worked. But it was that was us. It's going on. It'll be 3 years in November.
So at that point, that put a very bad taste in the city council's mouth. Even back then, the issues that I still have not heard be addressed were geofencing, whether it is designed for, as you say, that last mile or not. Because especially now, it's 100, I'm in LA, but I assume it's 109 degrees in Palm Springs right now. I can't see too many people getting excited about jumping on a scooter, going anywhere for prolonged distance until the fall or at night. Second, are there lights on the bike? I didn't see any safety precautions. Also questions on helmets, whether they're necessary, how do you sanitize the helmets? Also on parking, even though there are kickstands now, that does not prevent people from just leaving a bike 2 steps outside of a restaurant or a bar or Rouse for that matter. So are we focusing more on the tourism in downtown area? Or are we talking about the residents and spreading out into South Palm Springs, into North Palm Springs? Also, who's responsible? In Oakland, they come by every night with a big truck. They pick up all the bikes and bring them to a more centralized location. So we'll just start with those.
Sure. So there's a few things there. On the helmet thing, it's no longer required for a helmet, so that's optional across that's state law across bikes and scooters. On the sidewalk, on the kickstand, it's a double pointed kickstand. Is it 100% staying up? No, but it's about 98, 99% now, where it used to be close to work.
Let me restate the question. In terms of leaving it there or having a corral where the bikes will be placed. Not bikes, but scooters, but similar to how city bikes are in New York and most cities, they go to a more centralized location than just, okay, I'm here where I need to go and I'm just going to leave it here and walk away.
Right. So we would start with a free floating system so that people can, so we collect more data. So then I would work with Patrick and others in the city to identify where we're seeing rides start and where we're seeing rides end and where we're seeing issues at, and then turn in and then create parking corrals, right? So like, we don't know where people want to ride to or from in certain parts of the city. Like, you know, we like, for instance, in Santa Monica, they had a protected bike lane infrastructure plan that they put in place 3 years ago. They just amended their protected bike lane by 5 years and changed some of their paths around where they were thinking about putting their protected bike lanes because of the data they received from the shared mobility pilot program, and comparing that to like traffic. And so we don't want to like create definite like secure infrastructure yet until we learn from like what the pilot would show. And again, it would be a pilot, it wouldn't be perfect. So like West Hollywood just did this recently. So like they had followed Palm Springs lead and Bandit originally, and we're going to go to a parking model only, but they're allowing free floating right now, and they're adding parking corrals as they came up. And so then when parking corrals get added, just as we have it in San Diego, we make it mandatory for people to park in those locations. So if I was to go into the downtown zone, correct, or let's just say, or some other area that we know there's gonna be a lot of ridership, we can make it on the app so that you won't be able to end your ride unless you're in a corral. And so we wouldn't do that throughout the entire city, right? Because if I ride back to my hotel or somewhere else, like, you know, I'm just gonna wanna park my vehicle. And we don't want to put too much infrastructure in it all around the city for that, but we would do that in the beginning. And then your other question about lights and stuff, like, I mean, the lights just have become much further. I mean, like there's like really high standards in Germany where we operate, and that's the lighting that like goes on all our vehicles. And so like our vehicles have to be certified like very high up for lighting purposes. And then for as far as riding and at hot times and nighttime and during the day, you'd be surprised. We operate in Phoenix and Tucson and other cities that are really hot, you know, 115, 120 degrees, and people want to go that last mile really fast, and they'll jump on a scooter to get there. I would imagine, you know, I'm in Palm Springs a lot, and I would think about multiple times where I would connect to local businesses or go to a different restaurant that's not in downtown, maybe some other part of the city, because I can expand my horizons of where I want to go visit and what business I want to go support.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for all the questions.
Oh, are we guarding more towards the residents or more for tourists?
It's going to be it's both. I mean, honestly, my options both. Like my husband and I would like to move there and raise our family there, but I'd like to make the streets a little bit safer. I'm still, you know, I'm seeing pedestrians are hit, and you know, I know Patrick and the city and others are really working on bike infrastructure, and you all are as well. But like, you know, I'd like to sort of speed up that process of making it so that, you know, it would be a 50-50 split. You know, it's not just tourism. We want to replace car trips. That's our mission. And so how do we replace car trips? And I think it's, yeah, are tourists going to use it? Of course. People that are staying at Airbnbs, of course, they're, you know, they're not going to have to take an Uber or Lyft anymore, or at least we try not to. But will it be perfect on day one or during the pilot? No, but I bet we'll learn a lot.
And is there a termination clause in the agreement for the city?
There will be, yes. They already have a draft agreement they've reviewed, that the city managers has reviewed, and council members are as well. And then this would come to council as well. But yeah, it's I think Coachella has a similar pilot program they're doing right now, and all that would be in there. They would be able to length the license within 30-day notice right away if they needed to.
Thank you.
Of course. David?
I have one question first for Jim, because I think you'll know the answer, maybe Patrick, and then a question for you, Tim. My first question is there, for the bike lanes, are they exclusively for bikes, or, you know, would scooters be able to use the bike lanes? You know, obviously we've got Barista, you know, Sharrows and everything like that, but is there any restriction on the bike lanes, or would they expect to be in the same bike lanes?
Did you say a question for Jim or Tim?
Yeah, because I think you know the answer as our biking expert.
Oh yeah, no. I think I envision bicycles as accommodating e-bikes, mobile scooters, and anything. And the idea is to get bikes off the sidewalks. And scooters and e-bikes are generally limited to go under 20 miles an hour, which fits in well. Anything above 20 miles an hour seems to be the breaking point where you move them onto streets, as far as I can tell. Tim may have better reference, but that's one of the things we like about e-bikes, is it gets the people who aren't ready for bicycles, or they're too hot, or it's too old. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but yes, I would say.
Okay, all right, thank you for that clarification. Then I have a question for Jim, which in our general plan update document, the housing element, I think they mentioned that the median age in Palm Springs is, I believe, 55, something like that. And Coachella obviously is a much younger population. So with all due respect to, the tourists and everything, but we have a very different residential population than most cities. So is there, specific outreach or training for older folks who, may not have ridden the scooters since, for 50 years, to sort of get them comfortable? Because if they're going to be accidents, that may be an issue there. So we have a different population than I think the cities that you're otherwise in, and Coachella is not analogous to Palm Springs in that respect.
Yeah, thanks, sir. So we do workshops, and we do, we'll reach out to if there's, senior housing complexes or senior centers where we could do a helmet giveaway, and some, we would put out some foam, sort of a foam test course. We can do that kind of stuff. Absolutely, that's very possible to do. We would like our community pricing plan, which is 50% off for rides. Anyone, I believe it's 55 and over, automatically applies for 50% off rides. So we try to make it as inviting and comfortable as everyone, but to be sort of fair, Bird is a lot of tech folks have gone remote. And I now have, I believe, about a dozen Bird employees that live in the Palm Springs area now over the last year. And a lot of young, and from what I'm hearing from the council members, is a lot of young families, and a lot more people are moving there. Obviously, we plan, husband and I plan to stay there and retire there as well. But we are seeing, everyone. I think it's, you'll see people across the spectrum on the Birds. It's really surprising actually, but everyone uses them.
Jake had his hand up, and Tim, I still don't have control back, by the way.
Oh, sorry. Let me figure out how I can give it back to you.
Thank you. I have just a quick follow-up related to what Carl was bringing up about the parking issue. And I was under the impression that you have a feature that you're not allowed to end your trip unless you can take a picture and demonstrate that the device or the scooter or the bike is placed in the way that you're asking them to. Is that, I don't remember if it was yours that I was writing or not, but is that something that your system also has?
Yeah, so we make you take a picture at the end of your ride, and it says basically, take a picture to prove that, not blocking access. It's not machine algorithm learning yet, where it's it only will let you on the ride if it sees the picture of the scooter. It's being developed, but it's not 100% there yet. So we just review them we have another outsourced company that reviews them. And I would say probably 75% of them have a picture of the bird in the picture, and we see it. So it's not 100% perfect yet, but it's drastically improving where it was before.
Okay.
I think it's time to wrap up. We've had a good presentation and a lot of good questions. So thank you again, Tim. And next we'll move on to the next item in the agenda.
Patrick, I'm not seeing how I can share it back. Maybe if I just
click on my picture, go up to my picture.
Oh, got it.
There you go. And if you click on the ...
Make host. Yep.
Hey, before you leave, Tim, really quick, I think Carl asked this. What's the initial footprint that you would envision, having been in Palm Springs? What do you see initially as kind of the area that would be covered?
It'd be the whole city. So we'd want to learn with, again, with the council and community stakeholders and Patrick and everyone, where you see it visioning. But I mean, I'd want the pilot program to be, for there to be access across the city. And so, because that's how we get more data and how we learn of how far people are commuting into where the community and are there micro neighborhoods that people are staying in, that we might not, that the data will show us. I mean, we collect, you would imagine how much data we collect on people moving. And unlike Uber and Lyft, we share it with the cities and help them plan and where that can go with. So that's the difference between us. So I would say citywide, and probably I haven't really came up with a number yet. I'm guessing that we would start with maybe 300 around the entire city. I think that serves the population, and then it can scale up or scale down based on demand, but that's what I would envision starting with in the fall. Thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. I'm good. I'm actually sort of interested to learn about this clear sky, the sky situation. I know it's been a conversation happening for a while, so I might stick around for a few minutes if that's okay.
You're welcome to. Thank you. So now we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of the meeting minutes. The minutes from the June 15th meeting. They were emailed and posted on Thursday, the 15th of July. Are there any comments or corrections to the minutes? In our usual process.
Hi, Roy.
Yes,
I
Jake.
had a comment. There was in the conversation about AB 1383 and the community composting conversation, I'm quoted to say that the primary objective of the Coyote Creek community composting objective, or that group, the coalition, is to serve the groups that aren't in 5 units or more in the properties across Palm Springs. And I just wanted to caveat it that I don't see that being the primary objective or the only objective, so that it doesn't seem so absolute as a commissioner that I'm supporting, that's what I'm saying that they're there for. I feel like community composting obviously has multiple benefits to a community. So if you could, I just don't know the process to update the minutes in that way.
We can just make the correction. That's fine.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other comments or corrections? Hearing none, then the minutes have been approved with the correction that Jake brought up, and that correction will be made in the minutes for the record. Okay, now we move on to old business, and the first item is the night sky ordinance. And I confess that I had expected that Rob was going to join us for this discussion. And while we were in the bird discussion, I called him and he said, no, he wasn't planning on being here. So I think we need to figure out what to do. The situation is that, the memo regarding the night sky ordinance had been brought up by Rob in the subcommittee a few months ago. And then there were some questions about what city codes, zoning versus municipal code applied. And I know that Rob worked with David and clarified that somewhat. Rob produced a new document, which is in the agenda packet. And he changed the references to the codes and made references to the California Energy Code. And also made 6 recommendations. We had 4 that we voted on the last time. So my expectation was that Rob would discuss the new document and then we would vote on accepting the recommendations, which are on pages 5 and 6 of the document. Has everybody had a chance to read that document? And do you feel ready to take a vote on the recommendations? And the point is, the document was a memo to the commission. And so if the commission accepts the recommendation, there still needs to be some more work. But then in terms of researching the codes and energy code a little bit further, but then we would go forward and create a staff report to go to council to pass the recommendations on for their vote. So the question is, has everybody read the document? Are you ready to discuss it and take a vote on the recommendations on page 5 and 6?
David Friedman had his hand up.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time on this. Rob isn't here, but I want to thank him for, forgive the pun, shining light on what I think is the most complicated legal issue that I've seen in my 6 years on the commission, and that's saying a lot. The challenge that I have is that we're dealing with, and Carl as an attorney will appreciate, we're dealing with conflicts of law here. We have two conflicting provisions of the city code. Certain provisions are in the zoning code. That's the one cited by Rob. And he mentions the energy code, but what he doesn't mention is that the energy code is mandatory under the municipal code as part of all of the rest of the building standards codes. It's 804-065. And that code sets out mandatory provisions, including the ones cited by Rob, saying, we should, follow the energy code. Well, we should. Point is that that's already in the city code, and it remains unclear to me about whether anybody, whether it's in planning or building, is actually enforcing those provisions of mandatory state and city law, and how the conflicts are resolved. So I entirely support all of the work that Rob is doing, but this requires a lot more research, and really for staff, and in particular the city attorney's office, to analyze how the codes work together, and then we can sort of see what gaps need to be filled. The energy code, and I'll mention that in my report, the 2022 energy code will establish, as of January 1, 2023, the model legal ordinance will be mandatory statewide, and so the city doesn't have any sort of influence on that. So once again, a lot of what Rob is saying will become mandatory city law in less than 18 months. A lot is already in the 2019 code. And where it gets even more complicated is there's the stuff that isn't in the code, the energy code, and I've confirmed with the commission that actually things like landscape lighting or lighting of public monuments, city actually can, that's not regulated by the state, so we actually can regulate those things. So this is super complicated. If we were to make a motion, I would say is to sort of ask staff, Patrick, to work with the city attorney's office to come up with some sort of, I think it's two points, which is, first of all, to analyze the existing state of city law, how the two codes work together. And then maybe this is the job for Bob, and I can work with him, is to say what isn't in the state code that we can actually implement. So we need a gap analysis. And so I think, that's additional work. So once again, I absolutely support, and I'm thrilled about the work that Rob has done. But this is a legal, this is super complicated legal stuff. I've done as much as I can, but it requires a lot more staff analysis, and in particular legal analysis, to analyze the role play between the two city codes and the state code. So that's sort of what I have to say. Where you want to sort of go for that, I don't know, but this requires a lot more work. And that's not any criticism of Rob. He's done a great job. But there's only so much that a former commissioner can do when there are lots of complicated legal issues involved.
So we have two other members of the subcommittee, and that's Alex and Jim. Do you have any thoughts about how we could proceed on this?
Well, I'll say, I'm still unclear how landscape lighting is covered under the code. And I thought, David, I just heard you say that landscape lighting is not covered.
It is not covered, and it's an exception to the energy code. So the energy code largely affects building performance. So
right.
What you're doing on your outdoor lighting or your parking lots, by the way, there's a lot involving parking lot lighting, as that's a really big issue right now in the code development process.
Right.
You build up a building and you install a parking lot, there's a limitation, strict limitation of what the lighting is on the hardscapes. So that stuff needs to be done, but landscaping is accepted from the energy code, not regulated. So we can do whatever we want in the zoning code on that. As long as we don't call it energy efficiency, we don't have to get the approval of the Energy Commission.
It would seem that 80% of our battle might even be in landscape lighting, as far as I can tell. I mean, the biggest offender that we now see are uplighting trees and uplighting landscape. Maybe we should focus our efforts in asking staff to look at how, if we can have some free range to apply this to landscape lighting only, and then see how that goes, and then take a more of a back burner for some of the other things like parking lots and things you suggested. So I think, it's a huge chunk to attack all of this at once. And I think the most bang for the buck would be landscaping.
And that we have free reign for. I've confirmed with the Energy Commission as part of the code development. They said, go to it. Don't call it energy efficiency. So that can be regulated in the zoning code, and it does not require Energy Commission approval. If we want to do things about the hardscape, or what Rob mentioned is the various lighting zones, that's in the energy code already, and it will be fully aligned with the model lighting ordinance as of January 1, 2023. So
Roy, I also had two minor edits in there that I sent. I think I copied you guys that one of the words, they had 300K lighting, it should have been 3000Ks, and the other one about the maximum lighting for landscape lighting that I'm still unclear on, because the stuff they sell at Home Depot is 100 lumens minimum, and they suggested a 10 lumen maximum, and I guess that must be in California code or something like that. It's the one question I still had outstanding, but I think the rest of it looks great.
I can also I just recently have gotten an invitation to join this committee, so I pretty much have no deep insight to contribute here. And I think the idea was that I could help with the education outreach component of it. I just asked Rob if maybe he could lend me some time. I can get more insight from him, but in terms of contributing to this conversation right now, I got nothing here.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, and that's one of the significant recommendations about having outreach and education to the community. Just in my opinion, it seems like perhaps if we de-scope this to landscape lighting, as Jim suggested, we'd be able to make some progress without getting into the code and legal tangle. And then we could move forward and perhaps expand it as time goes on. See Jim and Alex's heads. Is that something that we could move on with and basically regroup and take a look at how we would word the memo and how we would word the recommendations going forward with just landscape lighting? And how do the other commissioners feel about that? Because we have been discussing this for a long time. Any comments?
From my side, this is reading everything in the past few days. I'm not ready to vote on this, but it does sound like the direction of moving to landscape lighting and reducing the number of options you're addressing would make it easier to get up to speed on it.
But if that's the consensus of the commission and the preference of the subcommittee, then we can table this for now and allow you some time to take a look at it and then get back to us in a month or two. And
I have a quick question. I don't see anything on enforcement on here. Did I miss it, or?
Yeah, I don't believe there is anything in the memo, and that was one thing that came up the first time we discussed it. The difficulty of enforcing, particularly because of the times that the lighting would be allowed. So that
we've been using ad hoc enforcement with code compliance. So a number of people, if they see trees that have the 300 watts, 3000K lights uplighting their palm trees, will call it in, and they can just take a look at the piece of equipment and they can see if it doesn't comply. Those are already out of compliance in the city, but it's all done ad hoc. I think the combination of what Alex was talking about with some more education might get more people to start saying, hey, this is something I can report, or you can look at some of these lights and see if they're out of compliance currently. But not everything.
I can think, for an example, the house behind me has green uplights on their palm trees, which doesn't bother me at all, but it's in the backyard. And really only am the person that's affected by it. And I would not want to put myself in that position of like, oh, my neighbor has this on, you need to, I don't want to be that guy.
Mhm.
Code
I don't.
couldn't go into the backyard anyway.
Angle. I think they would end up sending a note out to somebody explaining how the ordinance works. But yeah, you're right. There's easy ones and hard ones.
One thing that I would strongly support focusing on landscaping, but if we're going to sort of push this off to September or October, really would like staff to come back with some with all of the issues that Rob has mentioned in terms of energy savings and things like that do also apply. That's why the energy code says what it is, and I really would appreciate for staff coming back to us and letting us know sort of how the energy code provisions are handled in the city, if at all, and then we can focus on our recommendations just on landscape lighting, because that's not in the code and won't be, and so that's the zoning code can fully address those. It's not the energy code, forgive me, be clear.
That sounds like a plan. There were really two things now. One is for the subcommittee to go back and rework this based upon landscape lighting only, but also to get some input from probably the building department on how the energy code applies.
Yeah, and any potential conflicts between that and the zoning code and how they're resolved. But that would be great. Yeah.
That's something that staff would do.
Yeah, and Patrick can liaise with building and planning, and if necessary, legal, and come back to us with the rest of the committee's recommendations.
Is that acceptable to you, Patrick?
I think so, as long as it's clear in those recommendations what it is that we're asking people to look into.
Patrick, I'll send you an email tonight or tomorrow.
And I can't guarantee it will happen right away.
Yeah.
So.
There's really no time urgency on that.
Okay.
Something that we need to know if we go further with the ordinance.
And yeah, thank you.
And Roy, did Rob give you any inclination? Is he willing to make a few edits to his letter to encompass some of this, or is that something I might want to do?
I didn't ask him. I think probably the best thing to do would be for the subcommittee to start working on the new scope and then go back and take a look at the original, the current memo and see what needs to be done with it.
Okay.
And we do have your comments for the record in an email.
Yeah, okay.
So is there any other discussion? And I believe there's concurrence on the path forward. Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to the next old business item, which is the smoking ordinance. And just want to refer you before we start to the memo and the agenda packet from Patrick, which gave the history of what we've done with the smoking ordinance. We've been talking about it for a few years, and the most recent thing that we did was vote on a draft ordinance that was a collaboration between our commission, Carl Baker, and Edward Ramarin of the Human Rights Commission, because they had written a memo about this, a draft ordinance about the same time. So we took a vote on that, I believe, at the February meeting, and subsequently the Human Rights Commission reviewed the ordinance, and they made some minor editorial changes. One major issue when we had our vote in February was whether or not to restrict smoking in multifamily dwellings. The ordinance as written does restrict it, and there was some opposition to that by a number of commissioners. So that's still an open issue with the Sustainability Commission and the current joint draft. So I think with that background, is there anything you would like to continue with, Carl?
Hi, yes, thanks, Chair Clark. So basically, this is kind of floated around for a couple of years, and the decision we made, since the Sustainability Commission was not in favor of the resolution as drafted, we decided to wait until the HRC, Human Rights Commission, took a look to see if they made any substantial edits. However, they made absolutely none. There were just a few grammatical tweaks, but there was no substantive edits made at all. So now we are back where we started, basically, with this resolution. The question becomes, what is the next step? The City Council has asked us for our review, and this is our review. This is not to say this resolution, as you see it, is what we're asking the city to adopt. The city has legal counsel, and they will review things and change things as necessary. But I think it gives the city a guideline to what two commissions are considering in terms of preventing smoking in public spaces and private spaces in multi-family units. Jim Flanagan?
Yeah. So Carl, thank you for putting this forward. I looked through it again, and I was one of the people that objected to multifamily. And mostly it's because my mom lives in a condo, and she's 82 and she smokes out on her patio. And she's at a point where she's not going to give up smoking. Her neighbors are all fine with it. So I can't get past this. So I looked through what Patrick sent out. He sent out what some of the other cities did. And I did find one thing that I thought was kind of interesting. In Santa Monica, they seem to have written up a way to sort of grandfather it in. So what they were doing is saying, all right, these apartments are grandfathered as smoking, non-smoking. And then when there's a change of occupancy, they all become non-smoking. I think that's one of the ways that I could kind of make this palatable. I know this is anecdotal talking about my mom, but I think there's a lot of, elderly people that are out there that are smokers. So I think this is something that you might consider what Santa Monica did. Just your thoughts.
My original draft did have similar language to that. However, I would disagree. I lived in Santa Monica when that ordinance was enacted, and I lived in an apartment, and it was just a fiat, like no smoking starting January 1, period. There were no carve outs.
Well, I read the link that that Patrick sent out, and it was on that link that he sent in his. I clicked on Santa Monica, and it explained how it worked.
My real experience of living there when it happened. I don't know what the link said, but I know what happened to residents in Santa Monica on the day that went into effect. Because I did notice there was similarly, there was a resident around the corner from me who would go out and smoke on the balcony, so the smoke would not be in their resident. And my window is open facing Ocean Park Boulevard. All of a sudden I smell cigarette smoke. And it's like, I'm looking outside, there's no one smoking in front of me. It's literally wrapped around the building into my unit.
Yeah, I think it's still a problem in multi-level units, but I can see how it's less of a problem in single level units, which is where my mom lives. So then I'm.
Well, the answer to that is you can't smoke. You just have to move 25 feet away from the common area.
Right, but the balconies are all surrounded by common area. All the balconies are surrounded by common area, as far as I know. So even though it's just lawn, it's a common area lawn. So that still wouldn't accommodate her, even though nobody is affected by her smoke because of where she is. So I'm not sure how to get around that.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Baker. It's even, I live in a single level, 10 casitas. When I signed the lease, it was no smoking, period. That includes common area. There is no way to avoid that. I get smoke coming in, and suddenly I'm surrounded by smokers. 9 out of the 10 smokers. And I can't open my windows. It's an older building, so it's all cross ventilation, which is wonderful. But I'm getting, and that triggers migraines for me. I could lose 2 or 3 days and, be violently ill from it. But now I'm surrounded by smokers, and, they know they signed the lease, but I think this is just the nature of the addiction. And I'm sorry about your mother, but, you know, and I know that a lot of older people, they're just like, I'm going to keep doing it, you know, at my age. But it isn't okay for the other people, you know, and the common areas, you know, be it the restaurants next door, well, their smoke comes over the wall. There isn't some invisible barrier. You know, they're not allowed to smoke in the restaurant, so they step outside the street, and that comes into the pool and into my windows. So I find it to be obnoxious. It is carcinogenic. So I'm sorry, I just don't have a lot of tolerance for smokers saying, well, I don't want to have to go 25 feet, or I'm going to have to go stand out on the street or in the corner. I'm sorry, you've got an addiction. I'll just leave it at that. It's not really okay. And it's not okay to force others to, you know, have to tolerate your smoke. It's unhealthy, you know, and it's not okay.
So I guess one question right now is, does the commission want to relook at the ordinance, the multifamily unit smoking provision specifically, and make a revision, and then we probably would go back to the HRC? Or should we stop at this point and report to Councilmember Coors, who was the one who originally asked us to look at this, and let him know where we're at?
Councilman Friedman has his hand up.
Yeah. I have two questions actually for Commissioner Baker. I just make sure that I understand how the definitions work, because the way I tried to track it through, but perhaps I've missed something, is that for multifamily, the prohibition is only against smoking in common areas, and you can smoke in your unit. Is that correct? Do I understand that correctly?
Well, there are options in that, and we did not select any of those options. There was sort of there was a grandfather clause option originally, similar to what Jim had mentioned. So based on your condo or apartment unit, if it was not a non-smoking unit like Sandra's, then you could be grandfathered in until the new tenant came in, and then that unit would be non-smoking. That is an option that we can, my suggestion would be we send this off to the council and then list options such as A, grandfathering in certain units that will change when the occupier moves, or B, what was the other thing? It was just exempting multi-unit dwellings. I mean, there are a couple of options to do it, ways to do it.
All right, but I guess the question that I have is that, does this text as you proposed prohibit smoking in an individualized unit in a multifamily dwelling?
Yes.
All right, can you point me where I'm missing that link? Because maybe it's in a definition, but section 3A5 says that smoking is prohibited in common areas of multi-unit residences, and I could not find out. And then common unit is then defined as an area that anybody can, common area is every enclosed area that residents of more than one unit of that multi-unit residence are entitled to enter into. So I guess it is prohibited. Where is it prohibited in this text?
Hold on.
That you can't smoke in your own unit? I could not find that, but maybe it's in a definition that I just didn't track through.
Okay. Do you want to go on with conversation while I pull this up? I don't want everyone.
All right. And the next question, which remains my concern, is how cannabis is regulated, because it's in the markup of, you know, saying that, talking about cannabis. It's defined in the definition, and once again, there's no operative section in the text of the ordinance that actually says what's supposed to happen with cannabis. And then, you know, it's all referenced to tobacco shops, but is tobacco shop also a cannabis, lounge? How does that work with the, with the city code? What does, Veronica have to say about that?
Issue still remains unsettled, Commissioner. As you mentioned 2 years ago, that would have to go to the city because there is now different regulations on smoking lounges and cigar lounges that didn't exist before. And this does need to be modified to address those new restrictions or allowances for what are they, lounges? I guess that's what they call the marijuana lounges.
All right, my suggestion is that references to cannabis are deleted, and then sort of that's the question to go to council, because right now I remain confused when cannabis is defined, but they're not actually used in the text of what exactly is the intent of.
No, I got your point. I never had time to edit this because it went over to HRC, I have your notes from 2 years ago, and it's still, you were correct, and it still has not been addressed.
Okay. So those are my concerns, is that there are two, I just have concerns about the text in its current form. And, if it's simply a draft with issues unresolved, like how to deal with multifamily and how to deal with cannabis, then okay. I would actually probably prefer that if we send something to council, that maybe it isn't this text, but rather sort of, just a summary of what, what's intended. To the extent that that's known, because if the intent is to prohibit smoking in the individualized unit, I can't find that in the text.
And I'm looking at section 2 where it defines prohibition of smoking and tobacco products in enclosed places. And you are correct. It does need to have section, I guess would be 5 added that would define inside of living areas, because it mentions everything except your individual living space. You are correct as always, Commissioner.
Okay, sorry to be technical about it.
No, that's okay. I appreciate your diligence.
My legal,
Always the professor.
I believe that was the intent, to have that in there
Yes.
from the beginning.
So that intent should be expressed.
Yes, yeah.
So my suggestion is that if you want to send this to the council, then revise the text just to say that, to add that.
Yep.
Strip out cannabis, and then simply flag the issue of what should we do about cannabis, and let council sort of figure that out, because otherwise I think you've got a lot more work of trying to figure out what to do with your definition, because the definition's there, but it's not actually used.
Yep. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
And Don has his hand up, and I did just want to mention that we did get one comment from the public on this. We were kind of waiting to see if we got any more, but there was a suggestion by the commenter, so we're sending that around to everybody now too.
That was a written comment that we got?
Yeah, it was an email that we got yesterday.
Great. There was the one from Paul earlier in the meeting too.
Right, in addition to Paul's comments.
All right, my comments, one is very minor. I think there's a typo in the definition of landlord. Someone needs to look at that other than myself. And I'm sure David would catch it. And then I found it hard to shuffle through and figure out how it applied to mobile home parks, because we're said to be not multi-unit, but yet we have common areas like an HOA would have. And so basically it's just, I didn't have time to run through all of the logic for that.
You raise a very good point. We did not address mobile homes. That is a very good point. We omitted that.
Well, it's
unintentionally.
They're specifically excluded as multi-unit, but we have common areas like a multi-unit. So it may work. It's just I haven't had time to go through it all for that.
Again, the intent is not for this to be the actual document. This is just to guide the city when it creates the document.
Are there any other comments or questions? David, you were suggesting that we send this to council. I guess I would ask, are we ready to send it to the full council, or should we send it to Jeff Kors, who was the one who made the original request? It still may take some time before this is finalized and goes to the council for a vote.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine to send it to council member cores. I think forgive me for sort of skipping that step, but yes, with once again, probably a couple of bullet points of, as Commissioner Baker just said, is that here's a draft for you, for you to think about. And the intent of the respective commissions is, ban smoking here, there, whatever. And these are the unresolved issues for which council, direction input is requested. I think that would probably be useful to somewhat send the text, but to give a little bit of a roadmap, if you will.
I think what we could do is expand the memo that was provided in the agenda packet with some more of that information and then send it along with the draft to Councilmember Corrs. And I'd be willing to work with Carl on that.
And I can work with Councilmember Corrs as well, if necessary. I'm reading the email Tracy just sent.
I think we're done with that item. I think we made some progress. That's very good. And then we'll now move on to sustainability scholarship and home energy assessment audit status and feedback.
So, I'm sorry, before we leave that, because Jennifer is not here tonight, I did want to just make sure that whatever the memo is captured the concerns that people had about some of the equity issues related to limiting smoking in multifamily, which was kind of one of the concerns raised earlier. So I think that memo should highlight some of those questions and concerns that are outstanding.
That's a good point. So Carl, we can get in touch and
okay,
forward. Thanks. So sustainability scholarships.
So Tracy, you want to give us an update?
Yes.
And just by the way, our program in its current form closed at the end of June. So this is sort of a wrap up.
During the program, a total of 47 businesses participated between the sustainability and recycling initiatives. A total of $33,566 were received. I did want to share some of the comments because Patrick and I have had the opportunity to have more conversations with folks, but really wanted to relay to the commission how grateful business owners were. We really enjoyed when landscapers took advantage of the program and purchased electric leaf blowers. And so one of the quotes included was from one of the landscapers and him saying that he really noticed the benefits and differences. And then just business owners and their customers being grateful, where styrofoam had previously been used, replaced with eco-friendly products. So thank you from the community. It was very appreciated. And the next round will really focus on our restaurants, hospitality, bar, restaurant owners, and how the foodware ordinance will be impacting them. So that will be launching at any moment. Did anybody have any questions about the program? Oh, and I did want to also include, we had our first home energy assessment rebate application, which we approved, and the person received a report, which did not have a tremendous amount of data in it, but that program is still open.
Any questions for Tracy? Thank you, Tracy. Now we'll move on to climate action roadmap. Patrick?
So this is really more of a preview for folks. I know not everybody was involved a year ago or so when we started this process, but we are in the process of developing a climate action roadmap for ourselves and to both educate council members on the kinds of things that have gone on to date, as well as the areas that we believe need to be an area of focus in the future. So what we're doing right now is we are analyzing the results of our greenhouse gas emissions inventory and update and working with Placeworks to kind of do a little bit deeper dive into that data to see what opportunities we have for further reductions to help get us to our ambitious 2030 goals, and probably some increasingly tighter goals, if any indication, if work going on elsewhere is any indication. So we also are awaiting from Placeworks their analysis of climate vulnerabilities. So that will give us some insights into potential climate adaptation strategies that we might implement to help address some of those vulnerabilities. So we're looking forward to that too. So our plan is to work on that in the August, early September timeframe, bring that back to the commission in September, and hopefully on to council shortly thereafter for their consideration. So it'll include some options for them to think about. It also aligns nicely with our strategic planning process, which we hope to get underway here in the September timeframe as well, because it provides us with a little more detailed action plan on a topic that is certainly of interest to many. So anyway, so I think that's about it. Again, it was just sort of an update for folks, and just wanted to get you thinking about that topic again as we go into that September discussion, because this will be a big topic for us as well. So that's it.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yep, David.
Yeah, sorry to be as verbose as I've been. How do we want to integrate this with what we discussed yesterday of, and whether they're separate or a similar initiative? I mean, I have, some things obviously that I'm working on, and there's a whole bunch of updates because the draft is from September. There's a lot of things that have changed at the state level. So I can send you in the next couple of days just a sort of update, but just to sort of follow up on discussion yesterday. We can probably then integrate those discussions. So I kind of defer to you and Roy about how you want to sort of handle that, whether that's in the strategic planning or green building / solar, how you want to do that. But no matter how that you want to do it, I'll update the stuff that I've been working on before.
Yeah, so I think we'll continue to talk about the climate action roadmap and the contents of that in the solar and green building genre. And then we will incorporate elements of that into that priority planning document.
Okay,
that's
so
what I would envision.
What I'll do is I'll work with you, and then with the goal, if we're going to be dark in August, which is fine, then I'll work with you so that we have a draft of the roadmap, the staff report, and my energy ordinance on this cost efficiency all ready for discussion at the September 7th Green Building Solar.
Yep, that sounds great.
All right, that's fine. And if you can get whatever you have from Placeworks in between, you can reflect that.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions for Patrick on climate action roadmap? Thank you. Moving on to new business. First is the discussion of offsite dates and format.
Sure. So at our last meeting, we kind of broached the idea of trying to do a strategic planning session, kind of a get to know you session, because we had a lot of new members in the September timeframe. I think there is still some lingering concerns around COVID and the interest in getting together. I think the numbers will play out here over the next month, and we can maybe revisit how we have that session. But I think that we still need to land on a date for that and kind of nail that down. But the other thing I will say along that lines is that I don't know that the city is in the process of figuring out how best to bring people back in person and do hybrid type meetings from a technology perspective. So I'm not sure exactly when we will have the opportunity to meet in person. I'm guessing it will be in the September timeframe, but it may not be. So it may be a case where people need to make decisions about whether or not they want to participate, in which case there will be a virtual option. And so we could have a hybrid kind of offsite, as well as hybrid meetings going forward. So anyway, so I think we'll kind of play it by ear and kind of monitor that as we go forward. But I did want to talk maybe a little bit more about and get some feedback from people about the kinds of things they might want to do there. And I wanted to start by talking about our priority planning process. So David referred to the fact that we are starting, we did the strategic planning ad hoc subcommittee did meet a couple of days ago or yesterday, I guess it was. And we did talk about kind of moving that process forward and developing eventually a new strategic plan, probably in the next year. But as a start to that, what we are doing in our subcommittee, and we would certainly welcome any other participants in that process, is to review the sustainability strategy, the current one, and identify things that may be either outdated or no longer as important. And also identify those things that we definitely want to carry forward. So to take a look at that document and really analyze it and figure out kind of where things may fall. And so in some cases, it'll be just things that are outdated. In other cases, it may be things that are less of a priority for us moving forward. So that is what that group is doing. At the same time, and probably exactly at the same time, City Council is going to be reaching out to all of the committees and commissions to work with them to identify priorities that the council should consider as sort of citywide priorities. And so we will be doing an exercise to inform that process, but it will flow directly from the other discussions that we're having from a priority setting context. So it does speak to the need for us to get together for probably a longer period of time than just a couple of hours in an evening to do some of that discussion. And it certainly would be easier if we were in person in some ways, because we could put things on the wall and talk to, use sticky pads and all that kind of stuff, which we haven't used in a year and a half. So anyway, so I think it could be a good exercise for us. And we could also do it in a socially distanced way at the convention center. So if people still had concerns, we could do that. We could also ask people to wear masks. So anyway, so I think there's a lot of options for us, but I do want to see if others had anything else that they might like to accomplish during that kind of a meeting, so that we can start to think about how long that might be and what other kinds of things we might cover. So I'll pause there for a minute, knowing that strategic planning and kind of a little bit more get to know you kind of stuff will occur there. So I just wanted to see if there were other thoughts that people had about what they might want to do at that time. So not that that's not a lot, so.
Yeah, I would say that sounds like a pretty full agenda in doing that. I think that some of the input on, it would be nice from the subcommittee to have like sort of a summary of their analysis in terms of what's outdated in the current sustainability master plan and what some new issues might be, and allow commissioners to comment on that prior to the get together. And
right.
Is that master plan the 2016 document?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So it's about 5 years old. So it really is kind of time to relook at it. Okay.
And how do you
will mention that I had mentioned this before, but one of the things that we have been asked to do is to better align or kind of integrate our sustainability plan into the general plan. So if you think about it in 3 ways, we're going to be doing 3 things at the same time. So one is an immediate 1-year outlook of what are our priorities for the next year for council. Number 2 is what is kind of a near-term 5-year outlook that would sort of get integrated into the sustainability plan. And the third thing is, what are those bigger picture, longer term kinds of things that we need to be thinking about from a general plan update perspective, which is like 20 years out. So again, I think that those three things are the things that we need to kind of address here in the next 6 months. Okay, well,
I have a quick
we'll
follow-up
continue-
question.
Yeah.
Patrick,
Oh, Jake,
sorry.
did you have another question? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was curious how you envision that 2016 plan overlapping with the climate action plan.
So what I would envision is that there's probably a little consolidation that needs to happen with that plan, because like climate was in one section, energy efficiency was in another section, and I think there was another one that was kind of related. So I think there's probably a consolidation that needs to happen, and I would envision that climate action roadmap becomes the actions that are within that section of the document. So I think it directly informs that. And the concept behind the roadmap was really to get a little bit more feedback from council as to here are some things that we're thinking of. Are we going in the right direction, or is there something you don't want to touch, that kind of thing, so that we had a little bit more direction to say, okay, yeah, we've kind of got their blessing to go forward. So anyway, I would envision those would directly tie into that section of the document. And those are sort of like the strategies or the actions that we would take in that section.
And the work that I'm doing reflects that. As I mentioned in the email yesterday, the climate action section of the GHG section of the sustainability plan can be essentially replaced and looked at more concrete actions, because that informs our entire, really all of the actions that we would take. So it's not distinct. It's part of the rest of the package.
And clearly climate change has become much more visible in the last couple of years. And I think it's much more urgent that we address it across all of these documents going forward.
And again, I don't think we have to have all the answers in that September session. I think we hit it at the higher level stuff. And these are the things that are most important. And then we can work on the subtext to that. Okay. All right. So we'll plan on that going forward, and we'll do a little more work in trying to figure out a date too. And I'm thinking that actually it may be, well, we'll look at a calendar and kind of throw out some more dates. So more on that.
Are there any other comments?
I would just say it sounds like there's a lot of work for the subcommittee. So I think just targeting getting together to do this before the end of the year is a good goal.
Right. Yeah, we're going to meet the next couple of weeks each week. So we're hoping to get a lot churned out. All right. So we'll continue to move forward, and we'll kind of set the date when we have a better sense of timing for all that.
And the next item under new business is resident letter feedback. That resident letter draft was included in the agenda packet.
Right. So this is an idea that we had actually a while ago and just never did. So we are trying to get information out to all the residents. Initially, we were just thinking of sending it to new residents, but really I think it's probably a letter that could go to just about everybody as a refresher and a reminder. So I confess I haven't gone through a lot of the detail of the text in here, but I wanted to make sure that there weren't any big topics that we were missing. So we wanted to make sure that we kind of explained desert community energy. We talked about the leaf blower ordinance. We talked about recycling and where to go to get things recycled in particular. Periodic shredding events. It's always something people ask about. Water conservation is a big topic right now. I want to make sure we emphasize that. The HHW facility, we get questions about that all the time. The battery recycling program, that's going to heat up now that facilities are open. And of course, maybe some mention of the foodware ordinance, EV charger infrastructure. There's just a lot that we could put in there. And so I wanted to see if you guys had anything else that you thought needed to be covered in that, so that we could kind of figure out what the universe of information was, so that we can figure out the formatting. So Jim and then Jake.
Jake, we're probably looking at the same thing, Jake, but you mentioned bicycles in the beginning, but I'd like to, if we could get a couple sentences maybe that we're investigating adding new paths and we've put a bunch of new signage and some new racks up. And we'd like to solicit more feedback, requests, or concerns about your bicycling experience, minimum, but that's okay.
Okay, yeah, we should, I mean, this would be a great opportunity if we were going to do a survey to get it onto people's radar and get the word out.
Yeah, thank you.
And then my follow-up, I was going to bring that up, so I'm glad you brought that up, Jim. Second is, how frequently are you planning, would we be planning to put something out like this? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly?
So I would envision it would be probably semi-annually.
Got it.
Probably. I don't know that there's well, I mean, there's stuff changes all the time, but
right.
But I think initially we were thinking maybe just try it twice a year and see how that works.
Got it. Thank you. And the other piece that I thought might be nice as sort of an additional area and color in the 1383 piece would be to mention that there's a new local composting coalition for resource recovery for people, so that we could start like as a group promoting that, because I think it adds that additional color around education and why the importance of waste diversion, et cetera. So it sort of starts the tone. And so I granted, if that's why I was asking about the frequency, because I realize that that's not done yet. So I know that we don't want to be premature in mentioning it. So it seems like this would be a great place to put something like that when we get to a point to do something like that. But I just wanted to add that as well, because I know
that it would be a great place to stick something like that. I think when we get further along, and it's a resource that people can access. And we would also include a reference to that on our website, like we do other recycling facilities.
Right.
I have a
Alex.
comment.
Yep.
First, I think this is a great idea, and I think the announcement is lovely in the way that it's written, especially the intro is really nice. It's not a comment about a topic per se, but my recommendation would be it kind of seems like there's three different lines of communication happening currently. There's progress updates for what the Sustainability Commissioner, what the city is progressing on.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of an education component of like, why is this stuff important? What's going on in our community with the energy, for example. And then like the third line of communication, which at least for new residents seems most important to me, is just how do you use and dispose of resources? And I think it's a lot. It's not my expertise, but in the past year or so, I've been involved in a lot of kind of like environmental public communication pieces. And what my supervisor always tells me is to basically cut my text in half. And that would be one thing that I would recommend for this too. You have those three lines of communications, and it's a different audience, I think, that would be interested in each of those lines. And to give it all a huge mass of text at one time, I think it's unlikely, unfortunately, that many people would get very far through it. And if they do get far through it, they're not probably going to remember just all of that information that we gave them. So I think from my perspective, I would, especially if we're doing it on a regular basis, maybe split up those lines of communication. One is just like, you're a new resident, keep this copy, keep this form to refer to when you have questions about how to use and dispose of your waste. And it's just bullet points of recycling, batteries, electronic waste, and kind of like you keep that in your junk drawer at home so you know how to refer to it. And then maybe a separate newsletter that's like, Palm Springs cares about sustainability, and this is what we've been working on this year. Thank you for your support, and kind of split those apart to increase the chances of people reading and retaining and using the information that we give.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that is kind of originally when we envisioned this, it was maybe a couple of things, right? So maybe it's like a magnet or a one pager that you can post on your fridge that here are all the sustainability resources you'll need. And whether it's recycling, whether it's, the phone number for Desert Community Energy, the phone number for the household hazardous waste facility, that kind of stuff. So, so quick reference sort of guide. And then you're right. I think there's another body of information that's a little bit more newslettery sort of content-y. So you're right. Yep, that's a good point.
Hey, Patrick, I was thinking similar to Alexa, perhaps it could be broken, because if I got this in mail, I kind of scan it and it would go in the trash. I mean, quite honestly, maybe if we just broke it down into like a cardboard, if it's something short that people can read by the time they walk from the mailbox to the front door, at least speaking for myself, I'd be more likely to read the whole thing and comprehend it. So if we just broke it up and sent it monthly or something.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's another idea. We could kind of downsize it and send it more frequently.
And quickly, another quick follow-up. I think there's also an option to, obviously we can't be paying to send stuff all the time. But if you had a link or a QR code that, for those few that are interested in the longer version of the story, scan here and directs them online, and it has a more detailed version.
Yep.
That does save the mailing costs. I forgot about that. That's a lot of money.
It goes way down if we do postcards, but yeah. So, yeah, Don. You're muted.
There we go. This is minor, but it actually relates to what Alex and Carl were saying, which is that with the volume of the material, I found myself getting lost between what was being talked about, what Palm Springs, the people do, versus Palm Springs, the city does. And so if we want to create a culture, we need to separate out, this is what the city does, this is what the people do if we want to create a culture of sustainability. So that was just confusion.
Great.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Patrick, can we just send you like our comments? I've got a couple of just minor comments on the DCE, for example, or water. Can I just send?
Sure. Yeah, if you guys have specific comments about content, just send them my way or additions you want to make.
I'll get
Jim.
Thank
you. Do you have another hand up? Roy.
I had some thoughts along the same lines as Alex and Carl in terms of the volume of the material and the different categories and subjects. One thing that came up a couple of years ago in our waste committee when we were talking to Palm Springs Disposal is, I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, educating people about, but they were open to including a flyer with their bills. And I was thinking, we work closely with them, we work closely with DWA, and there are a lot of, there are water topics there are waste reduction topics there. Perhaps we can split them up and use them to send them out with their bills. That way it would save us on the postage, and it would cut down on the volume of material in any document.
Yep, that's a good point.
So Chair Clark, most people now don't get paper bills anymore.
That crossed my mind.
I don't get any paper bills. So.
I do with both of them, but I don't know how many people get paper bills from them.
Yeah, that's the challenge that we kind of ran into with the PSDS flyers. I think that they have them on their website, but again, most people do their bills automatic and don't even go there anymore. So, okay. All right, well, that's great. So yeah, if you guys have any additional comments, send them to Tracy and I, and we will be working on that over the next month or so. Okay. What's next?
We move on to subcommittee and commissioner reports. And the first is standing subcommittee and clean building.
Okay, thank you, Chair Clark. I'll try to keep this brief. A couple of points working on with Patrick on a sustainability issues for cannabis facilities forum. So we'll hopefully have a meeting and trying to get that out. This summer, early in the fall, and we'd look at issues such as energy and water conservation, ventilation, and solid waste management. And then separate but somewhat related, this came up through the Planning Commission in their approval some grow facilities in the area north of the freeway, which is the cannabis overlay zone. They asked City Council for some direction on solar for commercial facilities. So that's a whole separate issue, but both of these issues are strongly regulated by the energy code. So when we get a little bit more vision of what we want to do, I've lined up some folks from the Energy Commission who can present on what exactly the state rules will be. Speaking of which, the Energy Commission posted last week the final draft of the Energy Code for public comment. They're scheduled to approve it at their August 11 business meeting. Next Tuesday, the Energy Commission is holding a public hearing on proposed changes to the Green Building Standards Code, so I'll be attending that. And then last week, they had 2 days of workshops on building carbonization, and they focused on a lot of the new technology on heat pumps and water pumps, and in particular on an equity side, how to finance some of these upgrades for low and moderate income households. Another regulator that I'm following is the Air Resources Board, or CARB. And earlier this month, Governor Newsom directed the CARB to model a pathway to carbon neutrality by 2035, 10 years ahead of the state's current goal. So I'll get a little bit more information on that, and that will be reflected in the Climate Action Roadmap, because that's a new development from what we had last fall. Building decarbonization is also one of the core issues at next month's online California Climate and Energy Collaborative Forum. I'm one of the speakers on a panel on August 17th on the cost effectiveness explorer tool that I've mentioned in a couple of the green building solar reports. And I've been using that to develop a residential energy efficiency ordinance. And I'll send Patrick the link for registration if anyone want to sign up. It's between 2 and 3 on the 17th of August, which is Tuesday, and it's free. And you can register for any of the other workshops that might be interesting for you. And also another workshop series is the National Renewable Electric Lab, which is Energy Lab, excuse me, NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab, which is a division of the Department of Energy, Feds, has launched its Solar App Plus, which is to speed up getting a permit for solar on your roof. They're adding some features on battery storage because most people now are getting both battery and solar at the same time. City Council had expressed support for SB 617 that would mandate the use of the app. That's not going anywhere, at least this legislative session. So Patrick, I think I forward that to you and you can follow up with Tasia. Murrieta is one of the pilot cities here in Riverside County, the other side of the mountains. So Tasia can potentially liaise with her colleagues over there to see what their experience is. But that's, I think, also an action item for the Climate Action Roadmap to get some action on that. So that's very quickly, just a lot of things are going on, particularly at the state level, that I'm trying to keep an eye on.
Thank you, David. The next is standing subcommittee on waste reduction.
So just a couple of quick updates based on what's in the report. So one is Tracy and I did go downtown to do a little trash audit last week, I think it was, and we did find that most of the things in the bins were not recyclable, despite our signage. And so what we think is happening is that our signage has pictures of coffee cups and other beverage cups to not recycle, but that doesn't have the big slash through them. So I think people are seeing that and just putting those things into the container. So I think we're gonna work on that signage and adapt some of the signage so that it's more clear that those things should not go in there. So anyway, it was kind of interesting when we put the signs up, almost everything that we said not to put in there was almost in there exclusively. So anyway, so that's a fascinating little social study. I did want to mention a couple updates on the community composting front. So we did have a number of their members participate in the Scour meeting last week, I guess it was 2 weeks ago. And during that meeting, I had agreed to potentially meet with them before the negotiations were final and the final agreement went to council with regard to our new franchise agreement language, but I sent them an apology yesterday that said that I probably can't do that because I can't, it's not really my role to do that. So anyway, so I think there will be an opportunity to meet before it goes to council, but again, I can't necessarily guarantee that. So we are continuing to work with PSDS on language for the franchise agreement overall, and to address community composting as well. So that coalition did provide us with lots of good links and information. So I passed that along to our group to take a look at. So that process is moving forward. And then the other thing to know about that is that the coalition is doing a presentation for Parks and Rec on Monday. I think their meeting is Monday. So they will be presenting to Parks and Rec, which is really the critical body for getting anything done with regard to a community composting project, because it will most likely be on some sort of park property if something goes forward. So anyway, so it's really important that they get in front of that commission to at least get approval or to get some buy-in on the concept from a commission perspective. So Jake, question.
Yeah, thanks for providing the update on the Community Compost Coalition. I'm curious, I know that you mentioned that you're not allowed to meet with them ahead of time to provide the draft language. I'm just curious, what, like, are you seeing in your negotiations with the franchise agreement that there are sticking points that somehow haven't been addressed through the example language that was provided by the other communities throughout the state, where they've been able to coexist with a regional program as well as a community and local program?
So I won't say too much about where we are, but we are in the very early stages of that discussion. So we really just started it. So I don't know that, I don't know if we have questions yet based on what we've seen. I did look at it again yesterday. And honestly, the only one example that they provided that was more helpful than anything was that I think it was San Diego. But again, it was a non-exclusive franchise agreement, which is not the same thing that we have. So anyway, so that's, we're looking at that along with the other information that they provided. So, so I think we can take bits and pieces of what we see that are helpful. But again, you know, we're not opening up the franchise wholly to renegotiation. So we're trying to integrate concepts as we are able to do that. So, so yeah, so nothing yet. If there is something that we need more information on, I will be happy to reach out to that group to see if there's additional resources that they might have.
Right, because I listened to the Scour meeting earlier this week, and you know, there's a lot of really wonderful attributes to programs like that. And I think that even just with the commitment around diversion and education that otherwise doesn't happen with just, so the advocacy element, the support element, the trust element that can support, I mean, you just talked about you and Tracy going out and doing an audit for very simple things like putting recyclables in a container and everybody's doing it wrong. So I think that that's a perfect example of where these types of programs coexist. They're not really in competition with one another. And it'd be great to just be able to, as transparent as they can be about it, you know, making sure that this is a win-win for everyone. I mean, I think particularly since you provided an update, I don't know how firm this is, that it might be yet a year from now that they won't even have infrastructure or trucks or anything else. So it's, I mean, and this community composting group is going to be, you know, if they move as quickly as possible, given getting the siting and the plans and everything, they could be ready at the beginning of the year. And, you know, when I look at the numbers that come from our climate action plan and the GHG inventory that PlaceWorks did, I mean, you know, 24 million metric or million, yeah, 24,000 metric tons of, you know, that's a huge contribution. And, but they only process like, you know, 1 ton a week. Like that's not, they're not competing for the same volume either. So it just seems like the way that you can describe it, the way that they can do it. So I know that if you can't get their opinion because it's a private negotiation, that's fine, but it does seem like it would be beneficial as advocates of the commission and promoting good choices for the council, that we give them the right kind of education that says, look, like, this is why we're coexisting, et cetera. So, and I just wanted to also put out that since Lonnie's no longer on the commission, that I'd like to start attending those scour groups, just so that I could, since I'm the liaison with the community coalition, the compost coalition, just so that I'm involved as well, so that I can keep that linkage. So I just wanted to make that known today. But thank
Great.
you.
That's
Yeah.
great. Okay, any other questions?
I do have one more. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
sure.
You had mentioned before, as part of this process, that you were going to be engaging with a contractor to do a waste audit. Is that correct? So that we understood the amount of, like, I know that there's an estimate of what we think the organics are, and that we were, but the only way that we'll really know what we're processing and what we're dealing with as a community is if we actually do a waste audit. Is that still in the works?
So that is actually, I believe, part of the agreement with PSDS. So I will take a look at that to see what the requirement is. But I think under SB 1383, I think they are required to do a certain number of audits during the year. And so, but what I can't remember was whether or not that was for the performance model that they put forward as the state, or if it's the compliance model. So let me check into that to see what the frequency was, because I know that under the performance model, I think those audits are done more frequently as opposed to under the other model, which I think it's maybe just annually. But either way, I think an audit is done. So I'll check on that to see the time frame.
And then with the numbers that PlaceWorks used, did PSDS provide like tonnage that we process a year into their facility?
So that number comes from the data that is provided to the state. So those the state numbers in terms of the amount of waste that's attributed to the city of Palm Springs that's being landfilled.
Got it.
Yeah. So we're actually in the process of updating that annual report right now. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, great. And then Roy, at the end of the subcommittee reports, we might want to just circle back and see if anybody wants to join up on any of these, like we had mentioned.
That's a good point. The next one is World Environment Day. We had a report from Jennifer last month. Is there anything that Greg or Sandra want to say at this time?
Even though it's almost a year away, by the time it arrives, and it's through the UN, of course, it's already hot here. So we know it's going to be dealing with water, pollinators, and shade in one form or another. So I would say it's a good time for us now to be looking at particularly like maybe a shade tree planting program. There's the NPST, which has a national shade tree planting program. Maybe we could become one of those cities, because during the winter months, during the season, that's going to be our only time to be getting any of these plants in the ground if we want them to be able to survive. So I would think that if we prepare in advance for World Environmental Day and not wait for it to come upon us, we'll be in much better shape, because unfortunately the last 2 years because of COVID have impacted it. But this last season, with the inclusion of the writers, it was phenomenal. I was deeply moved by the profound nature of the work of, in many of these cases, very young children. So Greta Thunberg is not alone. So anybody that would like to be working on that, so that would include the pollinators, and knowing now that the Western monarch is less than 5% of its population. They've been decimated. They're considered extinct now, but not to give up, and there are other pollinators. So I think now would be a good time to start working on complementary programs to help celebrate that come spring.
Thank you, Sandra. The next is Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Walkability and Pedestrian Planning.
Not too much to update folks on there. Our contractor is still reviewing the data that was collected, and I think I meet with them again tomorrow afternoon to start to talk about how that data is going to be rolled out to the Community Advisory Committee. So there's still a plan to meet with the Community Advisory Committee to talk about priorities, and then also have some sort of a town hall meeting to do that as well. So more to follow probably on next in September on that.
Thank you. Then the next is Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Bicycle Routes and Cycling.
Jake, maybe I can start here. I was not available. I was in Southwest Airlines trap last time. I wasn't able to join in, but I think Jake presented the discussion from our committee. And I think the last meeting that we had, that the big focus was really raising awareness. And I think we discovered a lot of stuff in CVAG and some older stuff in the city. We found, budget light items for signage and maintenance and maintaining racks and things like that. I think one of the things we're interested in doing is sort of re-entering back into the city budget process, and how do we get regular items. I think in the past, we had line items there for all of those things, and they seem to have disappeared. So I'm not sure what the next steps are for that. Maybe Patrick can fill me in separately. And then the other thing was, I think that we asked to make sure that there's some set-asides in the sustainability budget for some surveys and gathering some count data. And I don't think we're going to do that until fall, but I think we put forward a number there. So I was hoping those two things got discussed last time, and maybe they did, but I'm not sure what else to add.
Yeah, that seems like what I at least reported on. Maybe less, you were more specific, but in general, the highlights of what we covered in our report out. I would want to follow up also, Patrick, you sent Jim and I a separate message about that we need to more formalize the committee meetings, or I don't remember the language of how you brought it up, but so I didn't know what you meant by that.
Notify.
We have to notice them. Yeah.
Okay.
So whenever you guys are meeting, we just need to send out a note, because you're in, I think, an ad hoc committee. It can be like a day.
Got it.
Yeah, it needs to be publicly noticed and available to people, et cetera, et cetera.
Maybe Patrick, maybe some of the budget, how the city budgeting process works could be something we could discuss in our break. If we do a breakaway or kind of meeting, that would be helpful maybe for some of us to know.
Sure, and we did include some money for outreach kinds of things, and we should have some additional money for a little bit of work. So I think the stuff that you had identified in there was doable, but again, we can circle back and figure it out. Right now we're sort of in that weird interim period where we closed the last fiscal year and we haven't quite made the turn to the new fiscal year in terms of all the money coming back to us into our account. So.
And the one other thing I'll add too is that Brett Klein sort of suggested that a lot of other municipalities have done these kind of surveys. So he said generally they're pretty willing to share them. So I may go out, I'll probably copy you on it when I request some, but I have a couple in my sites that I want to steal some survey instruments from. So you may get some email copies from me on that. Thanks.
Just kind of to get you guys thinking maybe from a priority perspective. So I think this is a really good example of one of those things that may or may not rise to the kind of the highest level of priority for maybe like the council or something, but it certainly fits nicely within our two of our priorities, which is the climate action stuff and kind of walkability and safety. So to the extent that we can identify, here's the one or two things we really want to get done this next year, that would be super helpful for kind of moving those things forward. So
we're starting to take a broader look at transportation in general, and bicycling would fit perfectly into that that study.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next is Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Night Sky. I don't think there's anything that we need to add at this point because of the discussion we had earlier. And then we have the ad hoc subcommittee on strategic planning and general plan update, which Patrick has addressed a lot of so far.
Right. My only additional comment there is, again, I made mention of the fact that we're going to be kind of taking a deep dive into the sustainability plan. If there's anybody that would like to do that with us, we decided to kind of break up the plan a little bit. So David and Roy and I are taking pieces of it. So if anybody wants to participate in that, we're happy to give you a piece or two.
So please let Patrick know ASAP, because we are planning to meet next week. The next is water conservation.
Thank you. Quick report back of this morning's DWA board meeting. First, I provided an update on the airport demonstration garden based on what Patrick had in the staff report. And second, overall water use is down almost 21% in June 2021 compared with June 2013. And 11% over the last 12 months. The governor recently asked California to voluntarily conserve 15% compared with last year. DWA per customer usage is up about 8% compared with last year, but that's probably because of warmer weather and mostly because of the rebound of tourism. So it's kind of hard to do an apples to apples, since the city was closed to tourists for 3 months or 3.5 months practically, and we've had a lot more people in town this year. So they're monitoring that at DWA. That's it.
Wellness, Carl, anything else?
Nothing else.
And finally, Desert Community Energy.
Two report backs from there. The DEC board held a special meeting on July 7th. They approved a rate increase of up to 4% for carbon-free customers to cover the additional wholesale electricity costs caused by the drought and heat waves that we're all seeing. There's a key issue with the large fire in Oregon, fortunately south of where Jim is, blocking some of the power coming in from Oregon into California. So that's a real concern right now. Second is the Assembly Utilities and Energy Committee was supposed to have a hearing on June 30th on SB 612, which would help ensure that community choice aggregators such as DCE receive access to legacy resource benefits held by an investor-owned utility such as Southern California Edison. It's not dead yet, that legislation, but it's converted to a 2-year bill for consideration in the legislature next year. And that's another area where the city council issues a support letter. So I'll continue to monitor that. And that's it for DCE. They did not meet yesterday, but they'll meet again in August.
Thank you, David. And the final item in the agenda is commissioner comments and upcoming agenda. For our new members, we do this every month. We go around the room, quote unquote, and ask if anybody has any additional comments and suggestions for the agenda for the next meeting. I generally take notes on that, and then I've been working with Patrick on establishing the agenda for the following month's meeting. So we'll start with Carl.
Nothing more.
Don?
Teaching me how to remember to unmute. Other than that, nothing.
Okay. Randy?
No, this is very comprehensive. So nothing comes to mind currently.
Thank you. Jim?
Nothing for me, thanks, Roy.
David?
Forgive me, but yes. So the Planning Commission and City Council will be reviewing the housing element of the general plan at their respective meetings tomorrow and Thursday evenings. And I submitted comments from a sustainability perspective. And I sort of mentioned, it's kind of my theme, I really would like to see the Sustainability Commission more involved in the general plan update. And I know Commissioner Baker, you're on the steering committee, but particularly on the climate adaptation and resiliency strategies and the safety element that's required by state law. So, we have a lot of initiatives coming along with climate action plan and sustainability plan and update. And so, Patrick, I kind of defer to you of how you want to work with planning, but just to make sure that we are really involved in that process and have the opportunity to comment, and more than comment, provide input as to what we want to see. So it sets the roadmap for the city for the next 20 years, and we need to make sure that we're fully reflected. Our concerns are fully reflected in that document. So perhaps a further discussion at the September, October meetings involving planning and David Newell will be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra?
Yes, a bit of a heads up. Starting in the mid-Atlantic states, I don't know if you're aware of this, there's been a killing of songbirds, wild birds, particularly the young birds. They do not know what's causing it, but it is heading west. They go blind, their eyes get crusted over, and then they die. So these birds are dropping like flies, literally. It is heading west. They've said, do not, if you notice this, do not touch them. Call animal control or the health department. They're trying to get a handle on this, but these species are being wiped out and we don't know why. So this has just been in the past week, so heads up.
Thank you. Greg?
Nothing.
Thank you. Alex
Nothing for me. Thank you.
and Jake?
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll go back at Patrick's request and mention again the committees and the need for members on some of the committees. I appreciate Jake's volunteering for Scour. That committee actually was down 2 people because of Lonnie's and Rob's departure. The Solar and Green Building is down to 1 right now, and that's a key committee. So I'd like to encourage you to think about the committees, your interest in the committees, and those that do meet right now via Zoom. There's an opportunity to listen in and see what's discussed during those committee meetings before making any kind of a decision. But I think as we get busier with all of the things that are facing us, as evidenced by the fact that we're having a meeting over 2 hours long tonight, I think it's more of the burden is going to fall on the committees to move some of these things forward.
And actually, Don, I know that you had expressed some interest in Scour as well. I wasn't sure if you were ready to commit to that or not. So
I'm trying to remember what Scour is.
that's the solid waste
Oh, okay.
waste reduction. So
Rob's acronym, standing.
Okay.
Speaking of, when does that meet? Is it the first Tuesday, Wednesday of the
it's
month
the
or something?
first Thursday of the month.
Okay.
At, typically at about 2 o'clock, but that's flexible, right? So we just land on the time based on the availability of people. So.
Okay. So our next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, September 21st. And we'll be in communication about other things like the offsite prior to that.
Roy, just one quick question. If we are interested in a subcommittee, what do we do?
Let Patrick and me know.
Okay.
Thank you. So I don't expect there will be any objections. So I will now adjourn this meeting at 7:54. And thank you all for participating. It was a very productive meeting. Have a good night.
Yeah. Sandra, I think your dog wants to go play fetch.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night,
Good night.
everyone.